calling to raise our children in the fear and admonition of the Lord. And we pray, Father, that you would help us to gain skill and wisdom and insight in doing this. Be with us today. Lord, you know the needs of every person here. You know the private fears, doubts, the questions, the struggles, those things that are peculiar to each of us. And we pray, Lord, that you would help each of us to hear your word in the ways we need to hear it in order to accomplish the things that you've called us to. Give us grace, we pray, in all of this, for Christ's sake. Amen. Well, we want to talk about the first 5 years of life, the training objectives for those first 5 years. And you know, it's so exciting, especially with the first child. You bring this little baby home from the hospital in a little plastic carrier. You set the carrier down, he stays there. I mean, wouldn't you love to do that with your 8-year-old? But of course, they don't stay in those carriers long because there's this tremendous development that takes place. I mean, if there's anything that the first 5 years are marked by, it's development in every single aspect. I mean, physically, children are developing. They develop from these relatively helpless little babies you bring home from the hospital that can't even fully control their muscle movement. By the time they're ready for school, they can run and jump and climb trees and do things you're too decrepit to do anymore. So there's tremendous physical development taking place throughout the child's life. There also is social development. He's learning how to interact with the people in his world. He learns how to be cute, how to be funny, how to be coy, how to ingratiate himself to his parents. He learns that you rub noses with mom. That gets what you want. You do fist bumps with dad. He figures out how to interact with the big people in his world. Intellectual development. I mean, there's probably no period of time where children learn as much as they learn in the first 5 years because they're developing intellectually all along the way, and they're learning that doors move on hinges. They learn how to use language. They learn how things work, and they learn about the world and how the world works. Tremendous intellectual development. Spiritually, the child is developing, either along the lines, as we saw last night, of loving God and knowing God, or they're bowing before idols and worshiping and serving other gods. But there's tremendous development, and it's overwhelming. We have a little child, you have this great sense, especially with the first one, tremendous potential here. I'm the steward of this potential. God has called me to raise this child, and it's overwhelming. What do I focus on? What do I accomplish? And I want to give you a single overarching training objective. It's not the only thing you're going to do, but it's one of the most important things you need to do in the first 5 years. And that is to help our children to be people under authority. It's really what Ephesians chapter 6 calls us to. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. It's the right thing to do. Honor your father and your mother, for it's the first commandment with a promise, that may go well with you, and you may enjoy long life on the earth. When I was a child, that was my first memory verse. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. I can remember even as a child thinking it was a strange happenstance that the first verse I memorized was about obeying mom and dad. Of course, as I got older, I realized it wasn't by happenstance, it was the plan. It was by design. That was the first verse that I had to memorize. My dad had this thing he would do with us. If we were slow to obey, he would remind us by using Ephesians 6:1. And he would say, if we didn't obey, he would say, what's Ephesians 6:1? And we would quote the verse, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. He would say, well, you know what you need to do then, don't you? And we would accept the inevitable and do whatever it was we were supposed to do. He brought a friend home from work one night. He's giving direction. Dad's giving direction throughout the night. Okay, it's time for you to set the table. It's not my turn. I did it last night. What's Ephesians 6:1? The table gets set. Okay, it's time for you to do the dishes. I've got homework. You know, what's Ephesians 6:1? The dishes get done. At the end of the night, he said, okay, kids, it's time to say goodnight to our guests and go to bed. Daddy, it's only 8:30. Can't we stay home up till 9 o'clock? What's Ephesians 6:1? So we said goodnight. We all went off to bed. At the end of the night, when this man was leaving, he said, by the way, what is Ephesians 6:1? Seems like this magical phrase you say to kids and they automatically obey you. But of course, it's not magic. It's a training process. We need to train our children to honor and obey father and mother. Now, what God has done in this passage is amazing because he's given us a circle in which children are to live. And the boundary of the circle is honor and obey father and mother. And the context of the circle, there are these marvelous promises. It'll go well with you, and you will enjoy long life. It's a circle of blessing. It's the very best place in the world for your child to be. Every one of you as parents wants for it to go well with your child, and you want them to enjoy long life. It's something your children want for themselves. And one of the reasons why it's so important to teach them to live under authority is we want these blessings to come to them that God promises as they honor and obey father and mother. And we need to make a very beautiful presentation of this truth. I think of it, we need to make a gourmet presentation of this truth to our kids. That means I never want to come to my kids like this. Look, I'm your dad. I put a roof over your head. I buy every morsel of food you put in your mouth and every stitch of clothes you wear on your back. And as long as you live in my house, you're going to do what I say. That presentation does not invite submission. That presentation actually invites rebellion. Because what have I set up? I've set up a head-to-head conflict. I've said to my kid, look, I'm the one with the power. I'm the one with the gifts to give. You live in my house. You do it my way. I'm inviting rebellion. And in a biblical vision, I want to present that very differently. I want to say to the kids, there's a God in heaven. He's good. He's made you and me and all things for his glory. He in love has given you a mom and dad who love you. He's put you in a family. And he says you should honor and obey mom and dad. And he promises it'll go well with you and you'll enjoy long life. It's the very best thing in the world for you. And mommy and daddy insist on your obedience because we know that's what's good for you. See, I think we need to make a very beautiful presentation of this. If you go to a gourmet restaurant, you know the food is going to be presented beautifully. It's going to look attractive on the plate. It's not going to look like it was thrown on the plate like someone loading a plate in an army mess hall. It's going to be attractively presented. Presentation is extremely important, and presenting these things in winsome ways to our kids is incredibly important for our children. And I'm persuaded that kids can get a hold of this, that you can actually do not have to have contests throughout your children's lives about issues of obedience. They can learn to live under authority. They can embrace the idea of being people under authority. Margie and I were in Portugal in September. We came home and we, after doing ministry in Portugal, we wanted to give some souvenirs we had gotten for our grandchildren. Stopped at one of the houses to drop off some souvenirs for them. All of our grandchildren live within 5 miles, so we're very greatly blessed. So we were dropping off some souvenirs. They were getting ready for a meal. They said, why don't you join us for the meal and talk about your trip? And so we had the meal with them. And when we were done with the meal, my son had a board meeting he had to go to, so he had gone. But when we were done with the meal, my daughter-in-law said to the kids, 5 kids, ages 5 to 16, she said, okay, kids, each of you knows your job, so let's get your jobs done, and we're going to go into the living room, and Grandma and Grandpa have some things for you. Within 5 minutes, they had cleared the table, put the leftovers in containers and in the refrigerator. The dishes were in the dishwasher. The table had been wiped off. The floor had been swept. And I said to Margie afterwards, I wish I had a video clip of this. That you can actually, family life doesn't have to be chaotic and crazy. And children can learn to embrace the idea, the goodness of being under mom and dad's authority. Well, let's give some definitions to these terms. What does it mean to obey? Obedience is submission to God's authority. Remember, it always has that Godward focus. It's what we do because there's a God in heaven. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, before the Lord, because there's a God in heaven. It's submission to God's authority that causes a child to do what he's been told to do by his parents immediately, without excuse, without complaint, without question. We need to train our children to obey mom and dad, to submit to mom and dad. Now, all of you have a parenting style. Whatever your parenting style, your kids know when they're going to have to obey, when you really mean it. Maybe it's when you yell and say, did you hear me? And the veins are protruding in your forehead and your neck. The child realizes, I better obey before she hurts herself, and so pop something in there. Or maybe it's when father uses all my names. Theodore Allen Tripp. Oh, he's using all my names. This is really important. When he uses all my names, I have to obey. Or maybe it's when I get threatened. Young man, do you want to be disciplined? Young man, do you want to be disciplined? Young man, I'm only going to ask you one more time. Do you want to be disciplined? 2 times after that, I better have obeyed. Or maybe it's when mother counts. 1, 2, 3, 67, 68, 69. By the time she gets to 70, I better have obeyed. Whatever your parenting style, your kids know when you really mean it. So why not train them? When I speak to you in a normal conversational tone, I say words that you understand. I ask you to do something you have the ability to do. My expectation is that you will obey me. And if you don't obey me, we'll deal with that in appropriate ways. God calls for children to obey mom and dad. That means that we we don't speak to mom and dad as though we are peers. It's submission to God's authority. Remember, it always has that Godward focus. That means that we speak to parents with respect for the parent's role as God's agent of discipline and correction and nurture in the child's life. We need to train.
All right. So hopefully you saw the connection between these subjects and the necessity for us to talk about expectations for obedience. And we needed to hear this as parents, Annie and I. Christians, Annie brought up in a Christian home, great examples of godly parenting, and sometimes we would just say, boy, we're having a tough time with this little Aiden. And one of the counsels that we received was, I think you need to discipline him more. And sometimes that's part of it. Now, there was a broad range of other things, but that was also part of it. We needed to require and expect obedience. And later in life, as my children got older, it was helpful to be around the example of other parents who they would say something and their child would obey. And you say, that's impossible. You're making stuff up. Tripp is making stuff up. No, he's not. This is possible. A lot of the problem holding you back is not your child. It is you. It is your expectations. Expect to be obeyed and then require obedience. And we have to talk about that first, and that's biblical. It's doing nobody any service to do the bad examples that he was talking about that I have done. And I had to reconfigure, after our first, we went to hear Ted Tripp talk at Grace in Timonium, and we really had to reconfigure our parenting. I was relying on my emotions to parent. I was disciplining when I felt like it, and not disciplining when I didn't feel like it. And that is going to get you into all sorts of trouble. I'm sure I'm still bearing the fruits, reaping the harvest of that even now. But you discipline before you feel like it, before you have been roused or angered. That's the ideal time to do it. And if you're in the midst of your anger, you want to hold off, usually, because you're teaching your children and yourself, you're training them for emotional responses. Whereas you want to just be able to say something calmly and be obeyed. And you heard him talk about, this was in the context of work and labor after the dinner table. And so this is good. This is one instance of it. One other instance of it that Annie and I ran into was when we were reading, it was a book about teaching children about money, and by Ramsey's daughter, Rachel. And she was just teaching children about money and how to do money. But in there was talk of work and labor. And that was one of the only times that I've heard that talk in a parenting book. And yet it's really important for us to talk about. So, children were made to work. So the main text that we're going from is just Exodus 20, which is what? Why can't I remember it? Someone can help me here.
Honor your parents and the
Lord. We're getting there. We're talking about the fourth commandment today.
Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy.
6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but the seventh is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. And notice this. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter. So who's the you there? If this you has a son and a daughter, who's the you? Parent, right. Probably head of household is first in mind, but also that applies to mothers as well. And it's but head of household, your female servant, your son, your male servant, your female servant, your livestock, your sojourner who is within your gates. You're in charge of this. You're quite like a work manager. You're managing the work in your house. This is properly under your purview as a parent. And it's talking about doing work and not doing work. And we'll get to the not doing work part, but we need to talk about the doing work part. I remember one time in high school, or maybe I was in college, and my brother was being really lazy. And so I decided to go through the Proverbs to find all the Proverbs that talked about laziness and work. And I never talked to my brother about it because there was so much application for me. There was so much in there that I was not doing that I needed to hear. So here's just a few. You're going to find a ton as you go through the Proverbs. But Proverbs 21:5, the plans of the diligent surely lead to abundance. The diligent, the hardworking, are going to lead to abundance. This isn't health and wealth gospel. This is under the sun reality of life. And so we need to teach them that diligence as soon as possible. Whoever works his land will have plenty of bread. In the New Testament, it sounds like he who shall not work, neither shall he eat. But this is in a more positive thing. If we want to eat, we do work for that. And you heard Tripp talking about some chores around the dinner table. Meals are a time of hard work for moms or dads or whoever's in charge of that, and they need help and they need assistance, and it is totally right and acceptable and understandable for people that are involved in that eating to be involved in the making or the cleaning up. So that's just a basic thing. Working, tying it in with eating. One of the first places that we were talking about working and where do you get the little kids to work? And that's one of the first places. At the table, sweeping up. The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing. What's that talking about? You'll hear lots of talk about, I want, but not necessarily a lot of talk about, what can I do to help, Mommy? What can I do to help, Daddy? And we need to train and inculcate and present it well. This is what's good. Hard work. In the midst of the family, in the midst of the workplace, that's what's good and right. And put that out and present that as a feast to the children. And laziness is getting nothing. And so we present that well to them, and they will want to work hard. They will love that adulation and praise and just the feeling of a job well done. Proverbs 12:24, the hand of the diligent will rule, while the slothful will be slave. As you're working, you are creating things, then you've mixed your labor with it, you're master of it. And you're going to get to rule over that. You're going to get to be in charge of that. And one of the things little children love is to be in charge of things. Help them to understand. Ruling comes in part from hard work. And if you don't want to do the hard work, you're going to have to be a servant. I remember I learned this in our first year of marriage as I was adjusting to being a new husband. I noticed Annie's telling me lots of things to do all the time. All this time, this lady. Tell me to do this, tell me to do that. What? I know I'm supposed to be a servant, but something's not right here. But as I thought about it more, the reason why that was is because she was doing the hard mental work of thinking about what needed to be done first. And I was just bumbling along in my sluggardness. And so even that mental work is part of the work that needs to be done. And that is one of the huge things, that if you can get your children not only to be working, but having initiative in working, doing mental work to prepare for the physical work, working smarter, not harder, then that's really next level. Proverbs 14:23, in all toil there is profit, mere talk tends only to poverty. Some of you have children who will say, oh, I'll do that. Some of you have children who will just fight you tooth and nail at the very first when you ask them to do anything. But some of them are very sweet and, oh, I'll do that. Oh, I'm going to do tons of work for you, Mommy and Daddy. I'm going to be such a hard worker. Okay, that's nice talk. Let's not leave it there. It has to result in action. Proverbs 6:10, a little folding of the hands to rest, and your poverty will come upon you like an armed man. And this, I just always remember this happens very early. Can you clean up your toys? I'm just having a little rest right now. Oh, okay. When are you going to get around to doing that? And so, yes, there's a time for rest, but there's also a time for work, and it's when I ask you to do it. Proverbs 23:4, do not wear yourself out trying to get rich. So there's all sorts of ways in which we want to teach them to work, but we also are going to need to get to that place where we have to show them, no, it's time for you to lay that down. It's time for you to go to sleep. Don't wear yourself out with this. You're frustrated, you're mad, you're angry, you're taking it out on all the rest of us. This work can be laid down for a little bit while you do get a rest. Maybe it's during the week, maybe it's nap time, maybe it's the Sabbath. Okay, so a couple other things. Okay, so application for us today, and we'll come to a time of discussion. Saturday is a work day. Labor to enter your rest. Saturday is play day at the Hathaway's house too. We do lots of fun things that day, but I think sometimes it's thought of exclusively as entertainment day. And it is one of those 6 days that you labor. Of course, that labor is going to be different for those that have weekly callings, but it's a day to encourage and require your children to work around the house. And this is going to look so different for each of us in our callings and how big our house is and how many people live there, whether we have a business, whether we have a farm, whether we how strenuous the schooling is at that time. But it is a time to work. I'm just commending work to you. Not all work and no play, but think of that as a work day. And try to prepare Saturday so that wife, kids, dad have little work to do. And we still struggle with this. And again, you're gonna make these calls in your family. I don't want to tell you exactly what to do, or just do it just like me. You're gonna make some of these calls, but this command is a care for the family, is a care for the wife, is a care for the children, to give them a break, and even fathers, give them a break from lots of commands, lots of things to do. Try to do that on Saturday so that it can be an enjoyable, restful day of worship that they look forward to. As I read Sabbath literature and talk about how do we make the Sabbath a delight, we've got all sorts of different ideas about that. Here's one of the easy ways to make the Sabbath a delight. You work 6 days, you don't on the 7th. Easy. But we don't do that. As early as possible, have them clean up their own mess. And if it takes them forever to do, give them a long time to do it. And I'll get to this. Don't allow multiple toy messes. So one of the things that we would do early on is, a little child would be playing with their trains, and we say, okay, I'm going to go play with blocks now. No, you need to clean up the trains. And so then they go to clean up the trains, and then an hour later, they're still playing with the trains. So clean up the trains can just be continue. Why don't you continue wearing out that playtime activity until you're really ready to be done with it? Or they'll say, I'm not ready to clean that up. Okay, fine. Then just why don't you keep playing with that? And one of the silly stories is we thought, oh, well, you know what? Maybe we're just harassing and haranguing them too much. Maybe we just have a whole room dedicated to the toy room, the toy area, where they can play and we don't fuss at them to clean it up. Well, do you know what happened? Do you know where the story is going? What happened to that room? Turned into a wreck, right? And then there was no room to play. So then what do? They started bringing their toys out into the other areas because there was no room to play in the wreck of a toy room.
They didn't want to play it.
Yeah, because there was no room. And so we just thought, okay, you know what? We are just going to have to require them to clean up the messes that they make right then. Now, don't allow multiple. That's partly our personal beef. I say that, not the Lord, as Paul would say. But this is one of the ways that we have been able to start inculcating work at a very young age with them. See the next one. And you don't get what you expect, you get what you inspect. I don't know if this is Don Celiak's or the Army talking here, but you need to follow up. Even if you have trained a child in how to do math and Saxon math, and it's going like clockwork, you need to check in. You need to check in on that. Or if it's the bathroom. One time, one child that we have is so great at being so diligent to do all their work. And then the one time I check, they hadn't done it. And that was God's grace to them. That was the day that I checked. So that they were caught in that. They know, I need to keep doing this. Or if it's the bathrooms, did they clean under there? Did they clean that thing that you have to move something to look at? Inspect. Require work, and then inspect it. You don't have to inspect it every time, but keep them on their toes. Keep them honest. And then training. Training means demonstrating, doing with, critiquing, practice again. How do they say to train? It's watch me, with me, show me. Have you heard that before? Watch me, with me, show me. So watch me do it with me, and then show me how you do it. It's not tell a child up in the way he should go, and in the end he won't depart from it. It's train a child up in the way he shall go, and in the end he won't depart from it. So a lot of times we just think it's just about our talk, and I've told him the things to do, he just doesn't do it. Train. More is caught than taught. If we want to teach them hard work, we have to do that. If we want to teach them to lay down our idols, we have to do that. If we want to teach them to rest on the Sabbath day, we have to do that. Work, the benefits of this, it teaches economy, self-control, and cost-benefit analysis. Do I really want to dump out all these toys? How are they going to know that calculation unless they're the ones that are going to be cleaning it up? Even at a young age, okay, you spread your food in this 3-foot radius here. Here's a dustpan and broom. Take as long as you like. That's how it starts. And they love vacuums. We were talking about that earlier. But it helps them to understand the cost. It teaches them economy. Now, you will, we'll get to this question later, but you'll make your own family's individual decision on this. This is adiaphora, this is not clear, but about allowances and money for work. And not all jobs should need a payout for them. There's some, again, you're eating, you're working. You're benefiting, you're working. You have clothes that you get to wear, you can do the laundry for that. Now again, each family will do this differently. And sometimes we as their parents think, oh, I can do that for them. Oh, I love doing that for them. I should do that for them. But that's good, that's nice. But also it's loving and nice for you to teach and train them. Then they can be doing that work thereby. And it's not like you're going to run out of things to do. Oh, I don't have any laundry to do anymore. What am I going to do? I'm just going to, I guess I'll do Wordle 20 times. No, can't even do that. So you're going to come up with other work to do. You want to train them now for that. That is a blessing for them. You say, oh, I love them. I want to do that for them. Love them. Show them how to do it. And it teaches them self-control. Do I wear 3 outfits a day if I know that I'm going to have to do the laundry? Maybe I'll pull that back to just 2 outfits a day. I mean, we're talking girls here. I mean, 5 outfits a day sometimes is in the offing. Okay? So work teaches appreciation for laundry, dinner, lawn care. You get them in the kitchen helping you. They're going to start to realize, whoa, this meal took forever. Cutting these onions or these cucumbers, that took me 2 football games worth of time to do. And so then at dinner, the comments start coming. Mommy, thank you so much for this dinner. Thank you for all the work that you put into it. We don't all make dinners all the time, but it teaches them to appreciate some of these things. Okay, do we have a mic? Okay, thank you, Andrew. any comments or questions or good ideas that you have seen? Yeah, Dan.
Putting a fine point on that, on the top bullet there about Saturday being work day and Sunday being a rest day. I think for kids, it's easy to see Sunday as a boring day, right? Like, and one of the advantages or ways to overcome that is to have them appreciate what rest is. And you know, we have an advantage of working, and we don't have to work on Sunday, and so it's like, you know. And if the kids aren't working very much, then it's just like, oh, now I just gotta sit around and you won't let me do such and such.
Yeah.
And so I think that in terms of emphasizing the importance of the Sabbath, but also making it a enjoyable and favorable thing for them is to do the work on the other days.
Yeah, and with little kids, some of their work is play. It is for them to play. So I don't want you to think wrongly about that. And yet, each of you will bump up against this situation where you say, oh, wow, I had no idea. They were listening, they were comprehending, they could do that. Your children will surprise you with what they're able to do before you knew they were able to do it. And that's one of the things that enlightened me to, oh, if that's the case here, you can also do work before I think that you're ready to do it as well. Yeah, Janet?
I think you're starting with obedience was so important. You know, work is something that is hard for all of us. And parenting is a lot of work. And if you're going to get your children to work, as most of you know, you have to work to get them to work. If they know how to obey, then the fight won't be so bad. But if they do not know how to obey, it will be very hard. They watch you. You know, I grew up on a farm, and we worked 6 days a week. We went out. I was out every morning, 6:30, slopping whatever I had to slop, feeding whatever I had to feed. And then I'd come home from school, and that's what I had to do, and I did my homework. Learning how to work was probably the best thing in my whole entire life. Working hard. Physical, yes, but I had schoolwork to do, and my parents wanted me to do well. You know, I look back and I think that was such a blessing to me. But on the Lord's Day, my parents also told me how to delight in the Lord's Day. We did take off from a lot of things. You know, we had to milk the cows, but some of the jobs didn't have to be done. And we really did spend afternoons reading Bible stories. We played Bible games. It was a delight. Guys, you can really, really, really bless your children by teaching them first to obey and then working hard. I made my children work. When they got old enough, 14, 15, I found jobs for them. Who was the one that had to work harder than they did? Me. Because you had to be with them, you had to correct them, you had to strengthen the work that they did. You know, you start with little things, like Nick said, sweeping, and sometimes it takes a lot of time to have a child learn to sweep well. I'm not sure, Matt, did you ever learn? But it's when you have a child, that the responsibility of what kind of child that's going to be really lays on you. You have to teach them to obey, and then you have to practice and be. I mean, if they're not going to delight in the Lord's Day, if you don't delight in the Lord's Day, if you don't delight in the Lord, they're not going to delight in the Lord. I mean, they see who you are. So I knew we were going to talk about this. So I'm going to lay some ideas back there for you about what you can do on the Lord's Day, because the Lord's Day is such an important part of my practice, of our family's practice. And I think it's important to you, but I love that Nick said, you have to learn to work 6 days. You've got to know how to work in order to rest. Anyway, end of my little sermon. But you have to teach your children to obey, in order for you to teach them to work and then teach them to rest.
And we've really appreciated the Barkers' encouragement to that. They just, especially with boys, give them work to do.
You have to teach them to work. It's not something that's going to come. Slothfulness comes very easy to all of us.
Yes. But idle hands is the devil's playground, as they say. And so you're going to have to, as you're seeing troubling behaviors, one of your answers, one of the things in your quiver as a parent is work. And it's going to take some ingenuity on your part to get these things done. Some of the problem that you're going to have is they're going to blow through the work that you have for them. You think, it's going to take them all day to chop this wood. But then they turn it into a game, and all three of them are at it, and they're having a blast, and it's done. So what does that mean? Then that means more work for you, more mental work, more work preparing. So just having them do the work doesn't get you out of work. It just means you have a different work to do. And so sometimes this looks like physical work. Sometimes it looks like cleaning work. Sometimes it looks like work for others. It's okay if you're out of work, say, okay, go on over to this neighbor's house. I'm all out of work. Go help them. I mean, that's not off the table with wisdom in mind. And that has blessed our neighbors and has in turn blessed us as well. But there's also educational work that you're putting before them as well. You're saying, I had to do that even this week. You have too much free time. Here's more work that you need to do. Here are your choices, this or this. Oh, well, I like to read history, so this is what it's going to be. Okay, fine. But you're putting these things before them to give them work to do. Any other comments or questions before we break into groups for discussion and prayer? Okay, so here's our questions for discussion. What are some jobs that you can give your child at this stage? And maybe you need help from people who've gone before you in this, but just think about it. What are some things that this child can do? And it may be just a new toy that they can play with that will help them. What are some tasks that you need to train your child in? One of the reasons why we're not giving work is because it's such hard work to train them. Oh, it takes so much time. It takes twice as much time and more. And then if one training would do it, well, that would be wonderful. But that doesn't. You have to keep doing that. But what are some things that you could train them in? Number 3, what are some drawbacks that you've noticed with too much playtime? Our family was reading Little Women this week, and they have a whole section where Marmee, I guess, lets them just play all week, and it doesn't go well. It's toxic. And so that's one of your clues to, okay, I need to really hear them on this work thing and start putting that before them if you're noticing the dangers of too much playtime. And it could, even with a little child, it looks like a bad attitude sometimes. What are some of the difficulties to endure in having your children work? We're talking about the blessings, but what are the costs that are going to have to be incurred? You might lose a vacuum cleaner or 2 from this process. Some things might be destroyed as you have them dust or clean. Are you able to count that cost? Is it worth it? I say it is, but you can mitigate that through good training and thinking these things through in the first place. But think through, what are the most likely things for them to break? Okay, let me hone in my training there. What will be your family's distinction between daily expected work and special work that merits an allowance? Now, you might not even do an allowance. I'm not saying that you should, or that you might have a different way of talking about this. But start thinking through that, or share that, or rethink it. Are we doing this right? Should we be just expecting more on a day-to-day basis? So just a question for discussion that hopefully will be edifying. How can we encourage rather than stifle initiative? So your kids are going to use initiative. They're going to want to fix something that's broken. They're going to want to clean something as you're teaching them to work. And then they're going to break something. They're going to something's going to go missing. Let's think that through now before we're in the moment and think, I really want to encourage initiative. How can I do that without too much friction? What are some jobs you think your kids can't do? Are you sure? So kind of going back to that number one question, but just keep thinking of things in the house that they're showing an aptitude in their studies or in their rhetoric, and think maybe they're ready for this. What is the parental attitude toward work at your home? Do you even notice how you're talking about work? How you're talking about your calling? What is your attitude towards it? Do you delight in this work that the Lord has given you to do 6 days? Some of us, we're doing the work that we worked to get to, that we wanted to, that we look forward to our whole life, and then we're complaining about it. I'm guilty of that. It's silly. So what is the parental attitude toward work in your home? And then finally, how did Christ demonstrate the goodness of work? You heard me maybe pray about that a little bit, but think about it. This isn't just something that Nick and Janet are saying. This is something from the Scripture. This is something that Jesus himself lived out. Okay, so I'm going to break you into groups, and I'm going to say Toffs and Thursbys, and Saltos and Marquettes. Yes. And Fails and Finleys, and Barkers. Could you hop in with the Thursbys and either of the groups over there? And Borowskis and Chechis and Owenses, and then I'll come back to be with Dan and Marlene and Teresa. So let's break and discuss some of these things and conclude with prayer if we could.